Hello, and welcome to the Techstrong AI podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and with me today is Mike Vizard. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm in New York today, so it's a gorgeous sunny day here. It's not even 80 degrees. It's amazing.
That sounds so nice. For us, I believe it's going to be 106.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to start off with some Futurum Group news. This is an article on Techstrong AI, and nearly half of some 1,000 enterprise buyers and influencers of AI products intend to change or add new vendors this year based on a study by the Futurum Group. So can you go into a little bit more detail about this, and how is this impacting businesses?
Yeah, I found this particularly fascinating because I've been trying to struggle in my own mind. It says, well, every vendor and his brother is going to add AI capabilities, so what would make one switch from one to the other if they all have similar AI capabilities? But, John Schwartz wrote this for us, and one of the things that he pulls out is that a lot of these AI implementations are a little shaky. And so people are now testing this stuff and determining which ones are real and which ones are kind of AI washing. A lot of folks are, because they're getting beat up by either investors or their C-level execs at their company, have added capabilities. And it turns out that not all these things are well vetted or well tested. So there seems to be a lot of concern now. And I imagine a lot of IT organizations are actually putting a lot of this stuff through their paces because it's a matter of trust at the end of the day. I mean, and part of the problem is we keep positioning this stuff as if it's always going to be 100% right. And all these models are probabilistic in the sense that they are going to be prone to errors, and we can do things to reduce those errors, but it's never going to be 100% perfect. Now, if you've got a process that needs to be 100% perfect, well, then maybe you need to put some humans in the middle of this conversation, because otherwise, if you're relying solely on a Gen AI platform, I promise you, there's going to come a day when Murphy's going to come up and bite you.
Yeah, absolutely. That human element is still very important. And I think sometimes business leaders are putting a little bit too much faith into these AI tools.
Well, and they all have dreams of, reducing the cost of labor to zero and creating all kinds of interesting new profit margins. And there's some truth to that. But, remember, on the other side of that coin, so let's say that I implement all these AI workflows and I reduce my costs. Well, I'm going to have a competitor who within about 30 days is going to do the same thing. And then they're going to reduce their price to match to gain market share. And we're going to have this rapid race to zero. So be careful for what you wish for here, because maybe not everything's going to play out the way you think it is. Customers are pretty savvy and they figure out exactly what you're doing and how much it costs you to do it. And then they start figuring out things like, well, what's 8% of their total cost? Because that may be the actual price. And so if your total cost is a penny, you're going to be making 8 cents.
Yes, indeed. So moving on, a lot in the OpenAI news world. So we have a couple of different articles. One is OpenAI has scooped up Rockset, an enterprise search and analytics startup, for an undisclosed sum on this past Friday. And this is a pretty big, significant acquisition. Additionally, the need for more safety testing has delayed this month's launch of OpenAI's latest voice assistant for ChatGPT called Voice Mode. And they'll be now doing a broad release of the assistant in the fall. So what are you hearing from companies in regard to OpenAI these days?
Well, I'll give them hats off on 2 points. One is, hey, they had the courage to kind of stop in something that they knew or suspected wasn't going to live up to expectations. Clearly, there's been instances where Google should have followed that advice, and now at least we're starting to see OpenAI behave a little more responsibly with this stuff and say, hey, we're just not going to experiment on customers and hope for the best. So that's a step in the right direction. The acquisition of Rockset is pretty damn smart. So the thing about the way we work with LLMs and the way that we customize and extend and train them is we show them additional data that's in a vector database, and we let the LLM see that data, and then it will compare the data sets that it has versus that data set to generate some sort of recommendation. The challenge has been that the LLM historically has run through its data first and then went to your data second. So you get a lot of noise in the system that can still lead to hallucinations in that approach. Rockset's interesting because they have a way to run that algorithms in parallel across both data sets at the same time. So you're going to have less hallucinations with that model. And I think we're going to see some interesting things happen across the board here in this whole sector. And it's just going to be a fascinating time, as they say.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And they've got a lot of things that they're working on. And of course, in this big race and competition amongst other big companies. So it'll be interesting to see how everything unfolds with them. So moving on, speaking about databases, we have another story about Oracle. Can you give us some details about this one?
Yeah, this is kind of rock and roll as well. Oracle is saying that it's going to embed the LLMs directly into the database. This makes a lot of sense, right? Because the LLMs are looking for data, and well, we're actually going to bring the compute to the data. I know that's a radical idea. It's the way we used to do things 20 years ago before the cloud arrived and everybody decided we were going to move data into the cloud. But now we're coming a little bit full circle. It's still in the cloud, but at least we're going to bring the algorithms and the compute to where that data in the cloud resides. Eventually, we might even do that on premise, which would be even cooler. But I think this is the beginning of a trend. I think everybody who sells a database is going to have support for LLMs in the database, and we'll go from there. And it's just another format. This may be the dominant way that enterprises wind up consuming generative AI and customizing it for their own purposes. And I may occasionally need to call out to a very, very large language model run by OpenAI or somebody like that through an API, and I'll do that. But LLMs are coming in t-shirt sizes now. There's small ones and medium ones and large ones. And if that's the case, I can certainly run the small, medium, and even some of the smaller, larger ones in the database itself and drive much better performance. And, oh, by the way, I don't have as much security concerns, and I certainly don't run into the headaches of moving data. As they used to say back in the day, nothing good happens when you start moving data.
Yes. And, to your point, too, I think what we've been hearing a lot from business leaders these days is they are looking at whether or not it might be better to be on-premise than in the cloud, and then whether or not their project involves a large language model or if it might be better in using a smaller language model.
Yeah, I think the whole thing's going to wind up being a little hybrid. I think we'll run a lot of LLMs, even smaller ones, on personal devices. You saw all these kind of new PCs that are floating around out there. And then they will talk to medium-sized LLMs that might be running in a data center, and then they too will in turn talk to LLMs in the cloud, and they'll all have these multiple interconnection points, and it will just be one giant hybrid language model framework.
Yep. So next up, we have a news story. This is about a robot coworker of sorts, courtesy of Orby AI, which claims to have developed the only available enterprise-ready automation platform that melds patented Gen AI with intelligent AI agents and a large action model. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I think this is a cool idea. I'm not sure about the only. I think, though, that everybody who's doing anything in the automation space is going to extend those things to include LLMs. Now, are they a little further down the path maybe because they wrote something natively and they pulled all that stuff together and they didn't have to smash, old legacy code together with, some sort of newfangled LLM? Probably. But our organization is going to rip and replace that which they have today to do that? Unclear. The Futurum survey that we referenced earlier suggests at least half would consider that. So we'll see. But, the problem with all these startups is they gain any traction at all. They seem to get scooped up and acquired and rolled into something these days versus becoming a standalone company forever. And I got this nasty feeling that all this AI stuff is starting to feel like a giant R&D project for other vendors to essentially roll up in time. And maybe we'll just have the same old players again using AI instead. I'm not quite bought into the fact just yet that there's going to be like an AI standalone companies that are going to stand the test of time. We'll see.
It really does seem like if they're a smaller company, it's a big struggle to stay afloat without being bought up by a bigger company.
Right. And if you're an enterprise, that sits in the back of your head. It's like, okay, do I really want to spend an inordinate amount of time with these guys and kind of develop that level of investment in those skills and everything that goes with it to wake up one morning and find out that they've been acquired by some other company that I kind of can't stand.
Yep. Playing that game, the AI game.
That's what it is. It might be called AI roulette.
Yep. All right. So next up, again on Techstrong AI, Datadog has made generally available an ability to observe large language models that IT teams can use to monitor, for example, latency, token usage, exposure of sensitive data, and toxicity. This was announced at the Dash 2024 conference. So can you share more about this?
Yeah, I think this is pretty cool as well. We need some ability to see what's going on with these LLMs and without being surprised. And we've all seen examples where people are getting outputs that are, shall we say, concerning at the very least. And plus, we need to monitor the performance. We have observability today that we use broadly in DevOps environments for at least monitoring. And now we're moving to observability, to be fair. But LLMs are just one more thing that we need to keep track of, and they're directly part of the application environment. So why not use a set of capabilities that we're already using for other software components and apply it to the LLMs? At least that's the Datadog thinking. There's a lot of folks out there who are already providing some sort of, I guess we'll call it LLM native observability platforms, but how many observability platforms are you really going to want? How many do you need? I don't know, but I guess it all depends on who starts the conversation. A data science team might find the observability provided by some startup that's native better, or may decide that those people speak their language better. Other folks are going to say, hey, as LLMs become part of the IT operations framework, and the IT team especially starts taking over more of the management of the inference engines and everything around that, maybe it makes more sense just to do that with an extension of our existing tools. It's a battle. There are lots of observability companies, and I guarantee you that all of them are going to be extending those platforms out to LLMs.
Yeah, and not only are there lots of observability companies, but there's just so much more to observe these days. I mean, business leaders have so many things that they're trying to keep track of. Even just the large language models, there's so many being used.
Yeah, it's impossible to keep track of the application environment without some sort of platform like these, because it's just too complex. There's too many dependencies, too many microservices. Nobody's sure exactly what gets connected to what. And it's not uncommon for folks to have issues where there's some sort of degradation in performance, but nobody knows why or what the root cause of this thing is. And unless you have some tool that lets you launch queries and find out what's going on, or maybe in a more advanced state, use some machine learning algorithms to kind of surface what those issues are, you're going to be looking for those issues for months before you find them. And then the maddening thing about it is it takes you 2 minutes to fix it once you find it.
That's how it always seems to go. So the last of our news today is about Lenovo. Lenovo has added a bevy of platforms optimized to run AI apps, including offerings from third-party partners that have now joined its alliance program, including a virtual assistant that provides customer assistance via a kiosk, which has been developed in collaboration with DeepBrain and NVIDIA. So how do you think this will impact the enterprise?
I'm hoping that Lenovo vetted these folks, and that's part of the value proposition. That's not always the case with some of these OEM deals, shall we call them, where sometimes they're just happy to have any software to bundle with something, and then they ship it out the door, and if there's an issue, they go yell at the software vendor. I think in AI, given everything we just talked about, people are concerned about what's real and what's not real and what that can be trusted. And if Lenovo is going to, lend its credibility to that, then that bodes well. I just hope that, that's what we're going to get as the output, because in the past, sometimes, it's been hit or miss with these types of bundling situations. And I think we need to hold everybody to a higher standard here and start looking at these hardware vendors and just say, it's great that you want to be part of this, and it's awesome that you got infrastructure to go with that, and we're definitely going to need it. But if you're just bundling stuff together to sell units, I promise, got the back end of that equation, people are going to hold them accountable.
Yeah, of course, we're seeing that a lot more often. All the big companies seem to all collaborate and partner together and bundle different services into their tools.
Yeah, and a lot of these agreements, we used to call them Barney agreements, right? They're basically, I love you and you love me, and hopefully we'll sell something together. These AI deals need to be better than that. They need to be things where it's been tested, it's been vetted, it will be supported, it will be some sort of money back guarantee when it doesn't work. It's got to really have some real weight behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us to the end of all of our articles we're sharing about today. So what are your final thoughts for our audience?
I think it's an exciting time. I think we're on the cusp of entering some sort of new phase here, right? I would say the first phase was all about AI startups and the soap opera and the drama that went with that. And, I'm sure it will make great made-for-television series someday, or Netflix, or wherever it's going to be. But I feel like we're getting down to business now, and we're starting to see ways to operationalize this stuff with people who know data. And so I say, as always, follow the data.
That's right. It's always the data. So that concludes our show. I want to thank our audience for staying tuned, and let us know what's your favorite news that we've shared today and what would you like to hear about in the future. And have a great day.
See y'all later.